The Branding Your Business podcast is for small business owners looking to build a customer favorite brand and a value-driven business. From solo shows covering marketing tactics to experts sharing their brand stories, each episode delivers actionable insights for entrepreneurs who want to impact the world. We're sharing how strategic moves and authentic connections can build a profitable business minus the burnout. Tune into the Branding Your Business podcast with me, Praise Santos McKenna of Come Plum, to design a brand your audience adores while building a life you love. We're back today with the Branding Your Business podcast. Again, my name is Praise Santos McKenna. I'm founder of the branding studio Come Plum, and today in studio, which I must say, I love our online interviews, but in studio is the best. So Liz crossed the Bay Bridge to get here. A trek from Oakland to San Francisco. For those Bay Area folks listening know, there's a lot of love here then, Liz. So thank you so much for doing that and being here with us. I'm so excited. Some of you may already know Liz. She was one of our speakers at our past Charge Up retreats, and she leads an incredible community, which I'll tell you all more about too. But we'll be chatting a lot today about kind of our path, finding a way, building community. So you're in for a juicy, juicy treat. But let me give Liz her proper introduction here. So Liz Best, which by the way, when I was telling my husband, I'm like, this is so cheesy. I already hear myself like the dad joke in my head. I'm like, I have the best interviewee today or on the podcast, and he's like started rolling his eyes. I'm like, but look, it's truly her last name. So Liz Best is an executive coach for women in impact, founder and facilitator of the Girls Club Collective, and host of the Women Changing the World podcast. Since launching her coaching and consulting business in 2020, which bravery to do anything starting in 2020, Liz has helped hundreds of leaders navigate ESG careers, up-level their thought leadership, and become more effective change agents. Prior to her entrepreneurial journey, Liz worked as a director of social impact for the world's fastest growing pre-IPO startup, a management consultant for BSR, and the sustainability manager at Qualcomm. She and her work have been featured in Brit & Co., Create and Cultivate, Forbes, GreenBiz, Ladies Get Paid, and NASDAQ. And so we are so honored to have you today and kind of just pick your brain a little bit about who you serve, who you are, because here at the Branding Your Business podcast, we love to tell founder stories that you can be inspired about real people doing this thing. But today, Liz, I just want to ask you, what are you most proud of today? How are you feeling about today, this era, this moment?
Oh my goodness. Well, first I have to say thank you so much, Praise, for that generous introduction. I will often read people's bios to introduce them, and it's like a gift and so uncomfortable to also receive it back, like, oh yeah, it is really interesting to hear your accomplishments recited back to you in front of you. But yes, thank you for having me. So worth the drive over the Bay Bridge. It's always exciting to have an excuse to put on real clothes. Especially working from home. But what I'm most proud of today, I think my answer to that question has to be the relationships and community that I have gotten to build over the past almost 5 years of building my business, which is crazy to say. I got started back in January 2020, blissfully unaware of what was coming, with really just on my heart feeling like so many women I knew who were in impact, sustainability, and ESG careers, who wanted to make the world a better place, were feeling lonely and burning themselves out, which was very much my experience as well. And I was like, what would it look like to, one, these people who I love to be more effective change agents and get what they want and live the lives of their wildest dreams? And two, what would it look like to really create space for intentional, authentic, reciprocal relationship building? Because you don't have to do it alone. And I think so often you can feel in this work like you're on an island, whether you're an entrepreneur or you're working in-house or you're a consultant. And I did not know how I was going to go about like addressing that on an island feeling when I first got started. But I had a couple moments even just earlier today talking to one of my past clients who's an alumna of our Magic Mind program, being on LinkedIn and like seeing people that I've introduced, like amplifying and supporting each other's launches and announcements. And I feel like really just getting to, again, build those relationships that have so supported and accelerated and amplified the real people who are really doing good work in the world is probably the thing I'm the proudest of.
This is also what I love about in-person interviews is that I can feel it. Like I can feel your energy. I can feel her pride when she talks about it too. And that's also what's so amazing. You've built relationships and you've built this network so that it has a domino effect, right? You're supporting these incredible change makers and they're supporting their communities and it just keeps on flowing and keep going. So yeah, you do a lot of one-to-many work, but you also do great one-to-one work of just checking in with people and be like, how are you? How's it going? How are you growing? And I could feel your satisfaction in that too, which I think is really huge and must feel really rewarding. You said when you started this business in January 2020, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. What was that expectation versus the reality of what it is now, almost 5 years later?
It's funny. I was talking to another entrepreneur this morning who was like, does it just always feel like you're in transition in entrepreneurship? And I was like, I don't know if it always feels like you're in transition. I feel like my experience is that it often feels either quieter than I want it to be, like I'm in transition, or like I'm drowning.
There's no in between.
There's very little in between. When it is in between, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I have to soak up every minute of it. I think when I first got started in January 2020, I really thought I was going to have an in-person business. I joined the assembly in San Francisco, which I loved. I'm thinking I'd have like clients come meet me there, like wanting that in-person co-working space and like a really dreamy, like woman forward, feminine leadership environment. And like assumed I'd be like driving to my clients' offices in San Francisco and Silicon Valley. Like that was really what I thought this would look like. I thought the gatherings that I would be doing would all be in person. I saw retreats as like a big component of that work, but also just getting together to offer mutual support and connect. And so, of course, it was like pretty surprising when in March I had to move. There wasn't much to move because I was still so early, but move everything online. What's been really cool about that is I never could have dreamed that my business would be so global. Like it has been so neat to get to support people on, I'm like, how many continents now? I think at least 4, maybe no 5. Yeah, I don't anticipate Antarctica making it on the list, although I could be wrong.
We're claiming it right here. Anyone listening in Antarctica, Girls Club Collective is open for you.
Totally. It does get tough with time zones. But yeah, it's been really neat to get to support people who are working on this work in this space around the globe. People have gotten so much more comfortable, myself included, with virtual intimacy in a way that I think would have given all of us, many of us, pause before the pandemic. And it's really enabled, I think, especially for people who are in a life stage where, for whatever reason, in person is less accessible. Like a lot of people who've moved to more remote areas, like for life reasons in the pandemic, people who are new moms or new parents. The ability to connect virtually has made a huge difference in people being able to like build relationships in a much lower lift and more accessible way.
And that's, yes, we're talking about we're either it's dry or we're drowning. Entrepreneurs are remarkable at pitching and catching. Like, okay, world, you're pitching us this new thing, which I thought my business was going to be totally in person. And RIP the assembly, I think that's how we originally met each other, which was this women's co-working space here in San Francisco. Quite a number of people on the show from the assembly. And so just moment, love that space. And you know what? This is also the power of community, even though it had to close in the pandemic. Look at this. And so I can only imagine what Girls Club Collective and that impact will continue to make. But yeah, so you were given this, it wasn't a problem, it was an opportunity, right? Okay, well, we have to be online. But also, look, like I think you could have totally still made it on 5 continents if you started in person, but it probably fast tracked you to that platform and to those countries and to those people because of that really interesting shift that you didn't expect. Were there other unexpected opportunities or gifts in your business in these last 5 years that really were like, thought it was a problem at first, but actually it came out to be a real gift?
I mean, honestly, I'm like, there have been so many. So where do I start? I think really there have been so many moments of evolution throughout the course of the business. I think a lot of what I have learned in entrepreneurship is patience and surrender and trusting the process. There have been a number of moments, I think, when I was like trying to launch something new or bring something new to life. And I had a really cute plan and there were different people involved in the plan. And we like really did everything in our power to execute on the plan. And the timing of the plan was just not the right timing. Honestly, too many examples to count. I think that's also what's been really interesting about really wanting to do business, like from a place of feminine and creative energy, which just isn't as linear like what a lot of us have been trained to think of business as, what a lot of the like existing containers and support for business owners will preach or teach. And so I think a lot of what I have am continuously building a relationship with, because especially in my business is very feminine in its energy. Our containers are very feminine in their energy, and they like unfold on their own timelines. They unfold when they want to unfold, how they want to unfold, with who they're meant to unfold with. And as like a recovering like person who loves control and a plan, that's like always a growth edge for me, to trust that whatever is meant to happen is happening, even when it's not what I or my ego might prefer. I'm like, I could give so many specific examples of that, but I think the meta theme and lesson, it has been time and time again of, I thought we were all going right. We made a map for right. We sent emails about right. We did a lot of posts about right. Turns out we're going left, and that's perfect.
Yes, you're like, Praise, there are too many instances where it's almost a norm. It's actually like, okay, well, we set expectations and we expect them to be a bit dashed, and we're going to have to improvise and to pivot and to do this thing. And I love what you touched on about it's not so much male, female, as much as masculine energy and feminine energy, and masculine business strategies versus feminine business strategies too. And I think our world needs to have more conversations about this, because here we are in San Francisco, California, which I know when I first started my business, it was hard to find people who are doing businesses and not the, okay, we need to get VC money, join a like incubator and then launch this thing and then IPO. And I was like, I don't think I need that, but I still want to create this thing and do it in a different way. So to hear containers and communities doing that and doing that well and being unapologetic about it, that's something huge and needed. I get that. It's one of those things, this business, we are like stewards of it, and it's kind of unfolding on its own in its own timeline. And yeah, allowing it to be, as I think, such a necessary part of that feminine leadership.
Totally. Well, and I think for so many of us, I know for me, this was a big part of my journey, is recognizing that my business is a separate entity from me, especially for those with like strong personal brands that often are a big part of how we start the business. But I am not my business. And that's a good thing. Then if and when and as you are in a place where you are identifying, recognizing, appreciating that separation, how do we also create space for our businesses to have souls and personalities and timelines and trajectories of their own, which are not always what our personal preferences might be for them?
Yes. And this leads me to such a juicy question that a lot of our listeners talk about, because here on the podcast, we talk a lot about building a brand, leading a brand, but also instilling some of our own values, but understanding what the values are of the brand. And it takes a lot of wisdom to figure out that delineation of, okay, here's Liz as a person. Here's her business as a brand, which is separate. But then also here's Liz as a personal brand, who's like a brand ambassador of what you're creating too. As a leader, where have you seen like the Venn diagram of the overlap, and where is there that separation, and what kind of frameworks have you thought through it?
I love that question. It's something a lot of people in my world who are founders with businesses, especially who've been doing this for a little while, I think are often asking themselves. We ran our magnetic AF program this summer, and a couple people who were in it were like, I'm really looking to like articulate who I am separate from my business. And other people were like, I'm really looking to articulate who I am in relation to my business. And yeah, I think it's such an interesting question. I know for me, so much of this comes back to values. And I had done some like really deep values work for me as a person back in December of 2019, right before starting my business, and got some like really helpful and beautiful clarity around what like my core values are, which to name just off the top of my head, a few of them, because I think it can be helpful with examples like love is at the top of the list, magic, radiance, curiosity, growth, creativity, and contribution are all like the things that really drive me. And I have a list of like what it looks like for me to live out each of those values on a day-to-day basis. And having those values really helped me make the decision to start this business, because I felt like as long as whatever I did, whether it was go back in-house to a sustainability career or go down the entrepreneurial path, as long as it was aligned with my values, I felt like I could get up every day and generally feel good about what I was doing. But then when it came time to articulate the values for my business, which actually for me, I would say my personal values were really like the driver of the business. For the first couple years, I was doing mostly one-on-one work. I had a really clear like mission and vision for my business, but most of the rest of my like branding was like my personal brand and personal brand pillars, because I was the products too. But as I started convening more and more groups of women and having more and more impact leaders who were my alumni who had worked with one-on-one or in groups, I was spending so much time connecting people to each other, which I love. But I was like, I feel like there needs to be a more formal home for this kind of connection, that this is a thing people want. And like, how can I make it easy for people to opt in? Because I was also noticing how for a lot of my clients, connection was like a huge part of how they needed to go about accomplishing their goals. But especially for the past few years, like people were feeling so exhausted and tapped out. And the last thing they wanted to do at the end of a long day was like send a DM on LinkedIn or like schedule an email or like try to find time on a calendar. So it's like, how can I make connection really easy? And so that was really like one of the central questions to starting Girls Club Collective as the formal entity, was like, what does it look like to make this easy? And in thinking about like who the community is for, it became really clear really quickly that it is not about your job title. It is about values. And so you can't create a values aligned community without getting really clear on what the values are. And in thinking about what the values of GCC should be, I was like, well, yes, like love and magic are like two things that I hope I aspire to be known for. People use magic a lot when they talk about what we do, but those aren't the values of the community. So like, what conversations do we want to have in the community? What do we want the community to be about? And really, in like looking at like who the people were who were feeling drawn to this work, what the topics were that were really like lighting us up and like helping facilitate transformation, and putting pen to paper on like a rough first draft, which has like since evolved, is really what helped us like identify the core GCC values, which in contrast to the personal values that I shared, are things like redefining ambition and authentic leadership and radical celebration and mutual support. And I can't believe I'm going to forget the last one.
A shine theory.
Oh yeah, mutual support is shine theory. Thank you.
Ambition reimagined.
Yep.
Radical connection.
Yeah. Oh, curated connection. Yeah. Radical celebration. Thank you. You're amazing.
I mean, she knew most of them people right off the top of her head, but I just had them ready here to go.
Amazing. Yeah, but thinking about like those 5 values, and like how do we then create an experience that honors those values, that gives people a chance to connect with the ones that are feeling most resonant for them in the moment, and that really like achieves our shared vision of building a movement of the people who are working to build a future that works for all of us.
That is so good. So from what I'm hearing you say, to recap, so when she was first starting the business, because you were the product, right? It was one-on-one coaching. Your personal values bled into your personal brand. Makes a lot of sense. People want to know what kind of coach they're working with, what they value, if there's value alignment. But I love the natural evolution that okay, as you worked one-on-one with people, you made connections. So there was this demand and need for community. And then this community started building. And then you were looking at it as a whole, again, of just like, okay, I'm stepping back. I'm being kind of this facilitator of this community. What are these values we all share and how can we put that together? And so, of course, some of that bled over. Love the term of magic too. And I get that feeling again, being in the room with Liz. It's palpable here. And that kind of bled over into some of these values, but it was really you examining the community and collection of people. And some of these things were the overlap that shine through. So there was a really organic way of finding the overlap and also finding delineation of like, there's Liz and then there's Girls Club Collective. And it makes sense that she's part of it, but it also makes sense that as a whole, this is its identity and this is its structure, which I'm curious, was it a lot of you evaluating the community as a solo person, or did you have a team to work with to help define those values? And
Great question. So I will say there are so many people who have helped build this over the last, I guess, coming up on 2 years, but really like year and a half right now. Initial first pass at the values, I would say, was really something that I was sitting with and like looking for those common threads and themes. But along the way, our early founding members in particular have contributed so much by way of like reinforcing what we're about, helping us identify new ways to explore and examine what we're about. At the time that we're talking, we actually are just in the middle of running a member visibility campaign around these values. And so people are like picking their favorite value and sharing what it means to them, which can be related to GCC or totally separate from GCC. And it's so fun to see what people pick. People have been really surprising me with their choices. But yeah, so it's been, I think, getting a lot of like feedback from people, doing so much listening. And then I do have like a really extraordinary leadership team now of people who've like been through different programs that we run, or who are just like part of our team in executing on like community stuff or communications and ops. And having their reflections, like one of my co-facilitators just the other day was like, I really just don't think anyone else is talking about redefining or reimagining ambition the way that you are and that we are. And like having that feedback, and also feedback when it's like, landing. I don't know if people are really getting it. How can we like explain it differently, or does it need to stay or go? Has been so helpful, because the central premise of like everything that we're about is that individualism is ridiculous. Going it alone is so 2010, and we're better together. So a huge part of my journey as a community leader has been learning how to like ask for help beyond the point at which I am uncomfortable continuing to ask for help, getting input, listening, and not feeling like I alone need to have all the answers.
so quotable. So many sound bites here. If you missed that, going alone is so 2010 and we're over it. We're over it, even though like some things from the early 2000s are coming back. Hopefully that does not come back. We're here for the wide-led jeans, the platforms, but going at it alone, we're over it.
Yeah, the shoes will keep, the rest will leave.
The shoes and the hair accessories are here to stay, but that way of thinking will definitely leave behind. And I just want to applaud you and celebrate you. Again, we heard Liz's story of when she started out. She's like, okay, let me make this in-person thing. And it didn't quite turn out that way. But now she has a leadership team of past alumni who've been through this program that was co-created with the people she was serving. And now it's becoming this thing that's kind of, it sounds like it's starting to lead some of itself, and you're getting reflections back from the people who are really valuable thought leaders in your community too. I want to celebrate that, because it seems like I always akin my business to being, I mean, now she's 10 years old, so that I think she's in fifth grade. I'm like, oh my goodness, she's like going to middle school next year. Well, you've been doing this since 2020, right? Like she's about to go to kindergarten. She's doing stuff on her own. Like, how does it feel to now see that your business is, and it has its own legs, and it has its own leadership team, and it has really involved members? How does that sit with you?
Well, thank you so much. I so appreciate that reflection and that celebration. I mean, I think it's amazing to reflect on, and I totally pinch myself all the time about so many things that have happened in the past year alone are things that were on my vision board, wild dreams. I was like, wow, it'd be so cool to be featured in Forbes one day, never in a million years. Like these things just happen, right? They happen the way they happen. Like we could talk about the value of Forbes on your vision board all day, but having a team of people and getting to work with people who I like really deeply admire and respect and who motivate and inspire me. Reading our member feedback survey, we just did a member survey, and reading people's responses and like how affirming people are and what we're building, and like even just like the like pep talks that they're like offering of like how great all the things are, and also like don't get discouraged, keep going, this is so needed. It's like it's just there's so much support. And I mean it's funny because it's something I talk to my like clients and peers about all the time is like how do we focus more on what we've accomplished. It's so hard, I think, when you're a leader and you have a vision for what something can be, and you are like, you see the goal and you're not there yet. And you're probably not going to get there. Like, even when you get there, it's going to look different. So we have to enjoy the journey, or else what are we doing? But I think that's like one of the most interesting parts of entrepreneurship, I think, is holding both the like, wow, this is so cool. If you had told me 5 years ago that I was going to be driving into the city from my beautiful home with my partner and dog that I'm obsessed with to like get to record a podcast in person with you and talk about this, I'd have been like, what? That is so cool. And also there's a lot of days that are like really hard and that people like say no, and it sucks to hear no when you don't want to hear no. And like, yeah, how do you like hold both of those things to be true and like feel the hard days and feel the no's, and then also create the space to like celebrate and acknowledge how much we've built and done, how much I think our businesses can also be such vehicles for our own personal evolution as well.
Yes, totally. Yeah. Which is a wonderful thing when you're leading a business. You're a visionary, you're looking toward the future, but sometimes we can get so there that we don't get to look back and see, well, wait a minute, this is actually really cool. This is actually really cool about the connections we were able to make, the conversations we get to have too, that we wouldn't have had without this business, and the people we've become because of this business too, which I think is huge. A big part of your story is not only gratitude, but also you mentioned this a little bit at the beginning, but also this business was birthed out of being burnt out yourself and these wonderful, I mean, positions in sustainability and more of the corporate space too. But it sounds like you got pretty tired, and it sounds like a lot of the people in your community, you can kind of sense that's why they were craving this community too. They needed that help. I know that a lot of listeners to our podcast can like raise their hand, identify with that. They're either going through it or they know that if they keep going the way they're going to burn out too. As one fellow burnout recoverer, those listening who might be going through it or like feeling the pangs of it, what advice do you have to help them kind of make it through or get to the other side?
I love this question. And honestly, like just so transparently, caught myself this week and was like, I see the signs. Like I have a fire trine in my astrological chart, which apparently is like a signature that's like you're very prone to burnout. And I'm coming out of like a big fall launch window, onboarding a new totally amazing member of our team, and I'm tired. I'm really tired. And I think I have this little print from this random little art stand in New York on my desk that's like, when you get tired, learn to rest, not to quit. And rest, I think, it's so important. And I know that for me, at least, and for many people I know, it's like when I'm in it, rest feels like the least accessible thing. And I think one of the ways that I have cultivated to build in more pockets of rest before getting to like a capital B burnout moment is I pre-schedule time in my calendar for like no meetings, thinking, creative visioning, for things like summer Fridays and long weekends. I also will be in a moment when I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'll like look at the calendar. I'll be like, okay, what can go? What can get delegated? What can go? How can I go spend an afternoon on a hike? I think at some point when we're starting to feel burnout coming on, there's like nothing more productive that we could do than step away. And I also think like I'm a big fan of Pooja Lakshmi's work, Real Self-Care, that like real self-care, it is things like saying no. It is things like resting. Yes, massages and crystals and whatever are great. I'm a fan. But like also really taking care of ourselves when we're in that burnout cycle often looks like taking a break, carving out time for ourselves, connecting with people. I think connection can be so huge, even just naming what we're going through, because I think a lot of burnout for a lot of people, at least in my world, can come from isolation and that feeling that we are in it alone. So it's like, who can you call? Who can you connect with? Who will get it? Who will see you? Who will hear you? Who will validate your experience? And also, I think putting it down. Like I was just telling someone on my team this morning, like I was going to have like a quiet behind the scenes week next week. I'm down in LA and I need to not do anything. And so what do we need to do to make it possible for me to totally disconnect next week? And again, I think it can feel so hard to do that, especially I'm someone who like responsibility is one of my strengths finder strengths. And so I feel so guilty about changing a plan. But it's like, how do we build in these micro moments of restoration, or sometimes the bigger moments of restoration, like taking a week off to go to the beach, so that we can do this for the long haul? Because I think whether it is like working as a change agent or starting a business, it's a marathon, which can be so easy to forget when we're like sprinting toward a thing.
100%. Yeah. So for practical purposes, really even just looking at your calendar and you're like, okay, here is time to create, time to ideate, not taking any meetings, not doing any admin, not doing any actions, but more looking inward, resting. And then a lot of saying no, which I feel can be so tough, especially if you feel responsible and especially if a lot of your work is relationship oriented, that I can empathize with that. Like, oh, but I want to help people. It's not wrong to help people. But then are you really helping people if you're only giving them 25% of what you have capacity for and what you can actually show up for? And it's really interesting, especially as I talk to people in the sustainability space, that ironically they get burnt out and their personal sustainability is at stake too, which we have to recognize that sustainability, we want it for our planet, for the world, for our communities, and for ourselves too. And so it has to start kind of at ground zero for it to pour out. I don't know if you saw this meme recently that showed like Simone Biles and a few other gymnasts at the Olympics. It just showed them sitting and taking deep breaths, closing their eyes, and taking moments right before they hit the floor. And then the caption was, rest is not being taken away from work. Rest is the work.
Okay.
I mean, these are the best of the best, and they understand it is so important right before they win that gold medal. And so, hello, we can also do that too, especially as you're getting even the inklings. I love that you said, like, even now when you run your own business and you're in charge of your schedule, you're like, Mayday, we're going in it again. So we're all susceptible to it.
Totally. And I think knowing what those signs are for you, whether it's like being short with someone, or maybe you haven't like talked to someone in your family for a really long time, which maybe is a good thing, but maybe it's because you're totally underwater, or maybe you haven't been outside in too long. Figuring out what those things are that help you know when you're at risk of burning out, and then figuring out ways to recalibrate. I love what you said about rest, because one of our Magic Mind alums, like who teaches brilliantly on like regenerative design, the way that she really, I think, helped a lot of people wrap our heads around regeneration is she like used the example of like an electric vehicle that like when you brake, the battery charges. And it's like, this is us too. When we break, we recharge. And so it's like, that is fuel. The recharging is fuel. And so not to make rest about like winning the endless productivity game. But I think to your point, it's like rest is part of the work. Like there's no marathon training plan that doesn't involve rest days. They're part of the work. So it's hard when your work is so existential, but also we're not helping anyone if we're serving from empty.
100%. Well, I want us to end this podcast interview with a little game. And so this will be not so much restful and slow. This is actually going to be really reactive, where I'm just going to say some words. It's a word association game. And this is kind of fun, just to see what comes top of mind when I say this word. So any questions before we begin?
Oh, I'm game. I'm excited.
Okay, lightning round. Okay. Word one, Napa.
Valley.
Fall.
Colors.
Community.
Impacts.
Secrecy.
Overrated. Doritos.
Lindsay Lohan. Lohan.
Love her.
Trials.
Tribulation.
And last word, birthdays.
The best.
The best from Liz Best herself. People are going to want to follow you and join Girls Club Collective. How can they find you? How can they get into your sphere, into your world?
I love that question. So I will say you can find me personally. I'm Liz Best, as Praise mentioned. It's Las, and my last name is Best. You can find me on LinkedIn or Instagram. It's liz.best. You can find Girls Club Collective by searching for Girls Club Collective on LinkedIn, or our Instagram handle is girls_club_collective. And then our website is girlsclubcollective.co, and that's the best place to go to find out what our upcoming events are. We have a lot of cool stuff happening around like the end of the year portal. We also will have all the info on how to join Girls Club Collective more broadly. You can get on our mail list. I send a monthly meditation newsletter once a month that people really like. So yeah, I would say those are the best places to keep in touch with us. And I would love if you found out about us on this podcast, please let me know.
So good. Well, Liz, I am so grateful to have you here. Rest up so that you can keep going. This is a regenerative way to live. I'm so grateful for you.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been so fun.